Welcome everyone tonight. My name is Tina. I'm the director of the Randall Library here in Stow. And we're happy to have you here at our monthly Sustainable Stow conversation. This is being recorded, just so you know. We would appreciate it if you could mute yourselves just to eliminate any background noise. We will be watching the chat feature, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there, and Rick will be reading them to our guest speaker. With that, I will hand it over to Rick.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging that we had great support from Tony Jagodnik from Bolton. He's also a member of the HeatSmart Alliance, where our speaker comes from tonight. So Tony helped us with the Green Corner article in the Stow Bolton Independent, which some of you may have seen. And he's here tonight too. So our speaker is Bob Zogg. He's one of the founding members of the HeatSmart Alliance. It's a volunteer organization that promotes clean heating and cooling systems in Massachusetts communities. He previously chaired the Carlisle Energy Task Force. Bob retired in 2016. He's after almost 30 years in energy-related consulting. He led numerous evaluations of residential and commercial buildings, energy uses. He's focused on heating and cooling, water heating, and refrigeration. Bob's degrees are in mechanical engineering. He and his wife have lived in Carlisle since 2012. So welcome. Glad to have you here, Bob.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate being here, and thanks for having me tonight. So the subject matter tonight is green heating and cooling, also known as heat pumps. And I wanted to just introduce our organization briefly. The HeatSmart Alliance, as Rick mentioned, I'm one of the founding members. Its mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating the adoption of energy efficient heat pumps in Massachusetts homes and buildings. We consider applications of home heating and cooling, but also water heating. We're an all volunteer organization. We've got participants from 27 different Massachusetts communities that represent over 280,000 households, and we are growing. We've actually doubled our participation in each of the last 2 years. Our general approach is to educate communities through events like this, through our website, and through articles and those sorts of things. We also provide one-on-one coaching to residents who wish to learn more about heat pumps, to evaluate heat pumps for their own homes. That's on a as available basis. We have more demand than we have coaches available, but we do our best. And we like to collaborate with like-minded organizations. And just to keep ourselves neat and tidy, we avoid any conflicts, and we do not accept any donations or referral fees from HVAC installers or manufacturers. So let's start with why heat pumps? Why even consider them? Well, for one thing, the energy we use for heating and cooling our homes is substantial. Here in New England, a full 30% of our total energy use is the residential sector, and that does not count transportation. If you break that 30% down, over 60% is for home heating and cooling. Another 17% on average is for water heating, domestic hot water, and another couple percent is for clothes drying. And those are all loads that 80% of the energy we use in our homes are loads that you can address with heat pumps. So if you really want to decarbonize your home, there's 3 basic steps. Number one, and this is the one we want to start with, is weatherize. That means insulate and air seal to the fullest practical extent. You can get a free energy audit if you're in the Hudson Light service territory. If you missed last month's presentation, I highly recommend you look up the link. It was about air sealing. It was an excellent talk. Sometimes we look for fancy solutions, but the simple caulk gun might be our best weapon to fight carbon. So weatherize. Step 2 is to electrify. That simply means switching from fossil fuels to highly efficient electrical appliances and equipment in our homes, and even including our vehicles as well. And then be sure to shift to renewable energy to the extent you can, or at least low emitting energy sources to decarbonize to the maximum extent. So those are the 3 basic steps. So what is a heat pump? A heat pump is a mechanical device that moves heat from a cooler place to a warmer place. We all understand intuitively that heat moves from warm places to cool places on its own. You don't have to do anything, it just happens. But if you want to move it from a cool place to a warm place, you need a mechanical device, and you need to add energy to that mechanical device. The heat pumps are really not any stranger to our homes. We don't call them heat pumps, but we use the same basic technology in our refrigerators, our dehumidifiers, and our air conditioners. And heat pumps are available for home heating and cooling. So that's one heat pump, does both heating and cooling, and water heating, but even for clothes drying and pool heating, swimming pool heating. This illustration shows how a heat pump can gain efficiencies of greater than 100%. That sounds a little non-intuitive to say you can be more than 100% efficient. But in this example, you can see we're taking 1 unit of electrical energy from the grid. We're using that in a heat pump to pump 2 units of energy from the outdoor air or from the ground if it were a ground coupled heat pump. And that moves a total of 3 units of energy into our homes. So with this example, you'd have an efficiency of 300%. So 1 unit of energy in that you pay for and has an environmental impact gets you 3 units of energy into your home. Now, heat pumps vary in efficiency. You might get a little more, a little less, depending on the actual heat pump. Let's talk about some of the benefits. You're going to see in these slides that this is really tailored for the Hudson Light and Power region. So Hudson, Stow, and a few homes in Bolton that are served by Hudson Light. And it makes a big difference, and I'll try to point that out. Your electric rates are roughly half of what most people pay in the state of Massachusetts. And you also have very low carbon emissions because you get a lot of electricity from nuclear sources. So keep that in mind as we go through. One thing that sometimes is just hard to appreciate is just the comfort benefit of heat pumps. Modern heat pumps, whether it's summer or winter, just give you superior comfort to most of the heating and cooling equipment that we're used to. This little illustration here shows how the orange line shows how equipment that operates on an on-off basis, which is most of our air conditioners, most of our boilers and furnaces, you end up with these temperature swings as you cycle back and forth from on-off, and your bodies are very sensitive to that. Whereas modern heat pumps run at variable speed and they just hone right in to the speed that gives you the amount of cooling or the amount of heating your home needs. Really nice. And here, especially in Stow and Hudson, the emissions reductions are really dramatic, 60 to 95% when you switch from fossil fuels. And the energy costs are 15 to 65% lower. It's a big range because it depends on what fossil fuel you're using. And we'll talk more about these numbers in a minute, but just to get these out on the table, these are substantial benefits. And heat pumps are safer. You're not burning anything in your home. So there's no carbon monoxide risk. There's no gas explosion risk or anything like that. Okay, now we're getting into some more of the details. What this chart is comparing is the annual emissions for a 2,000 square foot home of typical construction. So this is not a really well insulated home, but it's not a poorly insulated home. It's something in the middle. And we're comparing different equipment types and different fuel types. So these first 2 bars are ground source and air source heat pumps. We'll talk a bit more about what that means in a second. We're comparing to baseboard electric. So this is your traditional electric resistance heat. And then these are either boilers or furnaces. They have similar efficiencies. So the comparisons for boilers and furnaces are pretty similar. But you can see here that the emissions reductions are really dramatic. We're switching to a highly efficient electrical source, i.e. heat pumps. And as I mentioned earlier, in Hudson Light territory, you already have electrical supply that has low emissions that helps keep these bars short. And if you instead procure your electricity from a fully renewable source, you could even take these bars down to zero. So you have zero emissions for the heating system. So we're going to spend some time talking about some different types of heat pumps. We're going to spend most of our time talking about what we call the air source heat pump. But we will talk a little bit about ground source and even heat pumps for water heating. So the way we like to start to narrow things down is start by looking at your home and look at the distribution system you have for your heating system already. And that will help focus in on the best type of heat pump for your home. Starting with hydronic. Now, by distribution system, I mean the system that takes the heat from where it's generated in your furnace or boiler and distributes it throughout your house. So in the case, if you have a hydronic system, you'll have typically a boiler in the basement. Most will run on hot water these days, but there's still some steam systems out there. You'll have baseboards that may look like this, or may look a little different, or steam radiators. Also, you might, some of you may have radiant floor heating, which also is hydronic. Most other houses will have forced air systems, which means you have typically a furnace in the basement that's connected to ductwork, and that ductwork circulates the heat or the air conditioning in case of cooling throughout your home. You'll have registers, vents like these for both supply and return to be mounted in the floor or the wall. I know we'll talk a little bit about some other options, but those are the two most common. If you have a hydronic system, what we call the ductless mini split air source heat pump is probably the candidate for your home because it doesn't require any ductwork in the home. The simplest configuration we call a single zone or mini split. It has one outdoor unit. So this box right here would be mounted outdoors next to your home. It'd be connected by refrigerant lines to an indoor unit, one indoor unit, one outdoor unit. This indoor unit is typically mounted on the wall. Another configuration is what we call multi-zone or multi-split, where you have a single outdoor unit that's connected to multiple indoor units. So 2, 3, 4 indoor units. And any of these indoor units can be, typically they're wall mounted, but they can be floor mounted or even ceiling recessed. Or there's an option even for something we call compact horizontal ducted, which uses a short duct run so it can serve multiple rooms with a single indoor unit. So one distinguishing factor about these ductless systems, not only do they not require ductwork, but they're inherently room by room solutions. So wherever you have an indoor unit, that's where you have your heating and cooling. That gives you really good zone control. It's just an automatic feature. But these systems do not use your existing hydronic heat. So your existing hydronic heating system would simply be a backup system that you would use on cold days, or maybe even just use in emergency. I want to mention another option that's not real popular yet, but there's something called an air water. The air water heat pump actually uses hydronic distribution, so it actually heats or cools the delivery water. Typically, though, it requires some modifications to your hydronic system because it requires lower water temperatures. If you happen to have radiant floor heating, you might be really lucky, and this might drop right in. And if you want to do cooling with this system, cooling has a disadvantage that it creates condensation, and you have to have hydronic convectors that can deal with that condensation. So I'll just briefly mention air to water for those who really love hydronic heating, but oftentimes it does require some modifications to your hydronic system to use these. Okay, so if you have a forced air system, on the other hand, so this is where you've got ductwork in your home, you're probably a candidate for what we call a central air source heat pump. You'll notice this outdoor unit looks a lot like a typical outdoor unit for an air conditioning system. The only difference is it's typically put up on a pedestal, so that keeps it out of the snow in the wintertime. And there's two basic options for the indoor unit, and this would be typically in your basement. This particular one on the left side is integrated with a furnace. So we have a fossil fuel system that works with the heat pump and provides heat on the colder days, while the heat pump handles the more mild days. Or you can have an all-electric system that typically has electric resistance elements built right into this air handling unit to provide that backup heat. And the ultimate energy efficiency is with a ground source heat pump. This actually takes heat out of the ground, which the ground typically maintains a consistent temperature around 50 or 55 degrees Fahrenheit year round, so it makes a great source for heat. There's no boxes of equipment outside. Everything outside your home looks clean and neat, so it's very aesthetically pleasing. And you have another box in your basement here that handles the heating and cooling and distributes that through ductwork through your home. One important caveat here is that not all ductwork is sized adequately for a heat pump. So your contractor would have to take a look at your ductwork and make sure it's sized properly. And also it's important to seal and insulate your ductwork, especially if it's in an uninsulated attic or other spaces that are not insulated. So that's one thing to keep in mind. There are some cases where the existing ductwork just is too difficult to get into proper shape, and you might be back to looking at a ductless system for your home. Okay, I mentioned that there are a couple other delivery systems, distribution systems, I should say, you might have in your home. Of course, some people have electric baseboards. In that case, the ductless mini splits and multi splits are probably your best choice. And some people have homes that are hydronically heated but have been retrofitted for air conditioning. In some cases, you've actually had ductwork put in. And if that ductwork is suitable, you could probably use a central ducted system. If not, you're back to the ductless mini splits, which is fine. There's even some homes that have been retrofitted with what's called high velocity air conditioning. These are small ducts that can fit through walls and whatnot. Don't take up a lot of space, and there's even a few central heat pumps that are compatible with them. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about these air source heat pumps and how they might be used in combination with fossil fuels and what we're calling partial electrification here. And the chart I'm showing is showing the outdoor temperature going from 0 to 60 degrees. First showing a line for the heating energy costs for a ground source heat pump. As I mentioned, this is your most energy efficient heating system. And certainly in Stow, it's the lowest cost in terms of energy costs, annual energy costs. And obviously, as the outdoor temperature goes down, your heating costs will go up because you've got more heat leaking out of your home. Now, the air source heat pump behaves a little differently, and this is because two things are happening as it gets colder out. One, you've got more heat leaking out of your home, but the air source heat pump is actually getting less efficient as it gets colder outside, and that's because it's, excuse me, trying to extract heat out of colder and colder air. And so that curve looks a little bit different. Now let's throw natural gas in here. And again, these curves would look different if you're not in the Hudson Light territory, but for Hudson Light, these are about right. Natural gas is actually more expensive than the ground source heat pump. But for the air source heat pump, it really depends. When it's milder out, the air source heat pump is cheaper. When it's colder out, the natural gas is cheaper. So one strategy is to operate these systems together, and the controls for the heat pump can actually automatically switch over from the heat pump operation to your fossil fuel when it gets colder. And the optimum temperature at which you switch over really depends on your relative energy costs on the capacity of the heat pump. Another reason you might need to switch over is if you're simply not getting enough heat out of the heat pump to heat your home. And it also depends on your greenhouse gas reduction goals, because you may decide, hey, I'm willing to spend a little bit more on the heat pump if it allows me to go to a colder temperature and get more of my home off of fossil fuels. So use less fossil fuels. You might say you're willing to spend a little bit more money. And those that switchover temperature can be adjusted by your installer or the homeowner. Now, when you look at fuel oil, you'll actually find that in Hudson Light territory, fuel oil won't save you money at any temperature, but you still may use it because you may, as I mentioned earlier, the capacity of your heat pump may not be adequate for the very coldest days. So you still may need to use that fuel oil. And similarly for propane, propane is even more expensive. So now we're going to show the significance of changing that switchover temperature and how that impacts your fossil fuel use. This curve shows average daily temperature and the number of days per year that you have those temperatures. And for the most part, as you'd expect, we have fewer days that are really cold and more days that are more mild. I'm not really sure, frankly, why we have this little dip here between 40 and 50, but so be it. Here's where most of your action is in terms of heating. Now, if you select the switchover temperature of about 32 degrees, it turns out that you'll end up providing about half of your home heating with the heat pump, and the other half will be your fossil fuel system. But if you lower that switchover temperature to a little under 20 degrees, you'll be doing a full 85% of your heating with the heat pump. So it makes a big difference. And so if you can size the equipment and work with your installer to minimize this switchover temperature, make it as low as possible, you'll maximize the emissions benefits of your heat pump. So let's talk a little bit about the full electrification option. This looks a little bit different depending on which distribution system you start with, but I do want to just reiterate that with your low cost, low carbon electricity, full electrification really looks attractive or can look attractive. I'm not going to go through all the details on this busy chart, but I'll just mention the highlights here. Again, if you have hydronic distribution already in your home, you're probably a candidate for the ductless systems. And you can go fully electric by just simply asking your installer to size this equipment and install it with the idea of doing your full heating load with the heat pumps. In which case your legacy fossil fuel system becomes only an emergency backup. If it's in good shape, you might just leave it in place, but you won't typically use it unless you have your heat pump fails. Now with a forced air system, it's even a little bit more flexible. You might be using, let's say you're using a central ducted system, as I mentioned, probably would have electric resistance elements, and you can completely remove your fossil fuel equipment. That means the furnace, the boiler, excuse me, the furnace in this case, propane or fuel oil tanks, get all that junk out as long as you don't need it for something else in your home, and get yourself totally on electricity. So that's a big advantage. in both cases, again, you're getting lower emissions by getting the fossil fuel use down to zero. Now, let's not forget about water heating. I mentioned water heating with heat pumps. Heat pump water heaters, sometimes they're called hybrid water heaters. So this is your domestic hot water for showers and your sinks and laundry and that sort of thing. They look pretty much like a storage water heater. The only difference is there's a little can on top that has the heat pump. And the energy savings and the carbon emissions reductions are over 60% typically, compared to a typical conventional electric water heater. And with the rebates available, the payback period on this can be really fast. And in theory, any licensed plumber can install these. In practice, some plumbers are more comfortable with the technology than others, but there's nothing particularly complicated about putting one of these in. In most unfinished basements, sometimes if you have a very tight enclosure, you have your water heater in a closet, for example, it may get a little more complicated. You may need to ventilate the closet, that kind of thing. But if you have an open basement, unfinished basement, they're pretty easy to put in. If you're currently using fossil fuels for water heating, you may need to do a little bit of electrical work. But if you already have an electric water heater, you shouldn't need any additional electrical work. They require a condensate drain or condensate pump, but it's typically not a big problem. So I'm a big advocate of these. They're really not many people put them in, but I tell you, it's probably one of the easiest things you can do to decarbonize your home. So I'll try to address the question that you all have on your mind is how much will this cost? I won't give a great answer, but at least try to address it. Let's start out with the easy part, which is the energy costs you'll pay. So this is, you remember the emissions chart we looked at earlier. This is for the same 2,000 square foot home, typical construction. So it's just an example. It's not your home, but it's illustrative. And again, with your low electric rates in the Hudson Light arena, heat pumps are the lowest energy cost option you have. They even beat out natural gas, which is typically a low cost fuel. And they certainly do better than the other fossil fuels, and obviously they do better than straight baseboard electric. So again, you've got cheap electricity that's feeding into this. And another factor is that gas prices are going up. This bar here is based on gas prices for the previous heating season, and prices are already higher, and some think they're going to get even more high. So this bar is going to be stretching out. I really don't know enough to speak to Hudson Light and Power electric rates going forward into the future, whether they'll stay as low as they are. I won't speculate on that, but this is based on your current rates. So when we start to talk about the installed cost, the first cost, the equipment costs, my answer will get a little more squishy because it really does depend on your home, and the answer can vary widely. But the way to look at the first cost is you need a heating system. And some people need a cooling system or really, really want a cooling system. So to be fair, you want to really compare the cost of the heat pump, you know, the incremental cost of the heat pump over the cost of replacing what you already have, because that's your alternative, is to put in the same furnace or boiler or air conditioning system. Again, in Hudson Light territory, I'll get to this in a minute, your rebates are pretty modest, to be honest. That's a downside. So your first cost will tend to be a little higher, or maybe significantly higher, but again, you've got lower energy costs, so you may make that up over time. So just to summarize the rebates very quickly here, again, this is unique to Hudson Light. They're different from Mass Save. $500 for an air source heat pump or ground source heat pump. You know, that's pretty modest, but it's something. But this incentive for a heat pump water heater is really good because, you know, heat pump water heaters are cheaper than the other types of heat pumps, and it's a bigger incentive. So this can offset a big part of your first cost differential between a conventional water heater and heat pump water heater. And don't forget about the federal tax credits. If you do decide to go with a ground source heat pump and you're eligible to take the tax credit, you can get 22% tax credit off of the total cost of the system. Now, there is also probably going to be a modest tax credit for air source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. In 2021, they were like $300 a piece, but there was a limit of a total of 500. So if you did both an air source heat pump and a heat pump water heater, your total would be $500. That's pending legislative approval. I don't know whether those numbers will be going up for 2022. Okay, last stretch here. Your action plan. What do you do about this? The emphatic advice we'd like to give you is don't wait for something to break. If your current equipment, heating or cooling equipment, is over 15 years old, especially if it's a furnace, it's time to start thinking about how much it owes you and what could go wrong. A water heater usually doesn't last that long. So if your water heater is 7 to 10 years old, start thinking about what you want to do to replace it. The problem is if you wait for something to break, you've now got an emergency. You don't have hot water, you don't have heat in your home. It's going to be almost too late to consider heat pumps because you've got a lot that coming up to speed. There's a lot of decisions to make. You got to get quotes, blah, 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 blah. You know, even someone who really cares deeply about the environment is probably going to just put back in fossil fuel equipment because you have to. And now you've locked your home in for another 15 or maybe 20 years. Once you replace that furnace or boiler, it's going to be way harder to replace it again in the near future. You just invested a fortune into replacing it. So I just can't emphasize enough. Please think ahead. Please do the homework early. We're all busy. But if you wait for failure, you're going to be in a jam. Now, another situation you may be in is that you don't have air conditioning in your home and you really would like to add it, central air conditioning. That's a great time to consider a heat pump. And as far as I'm concerned, it's terrible to install an air conditioner when you could put in a heat pump. It's basically the same amount of work. You know, heat pump might be a little more expensive, but you definitely want to look at a heat pump if you're thinking about adding air conditioning. And certainly, if you're planning an addition, a major renovation, or a new home, this is really the sweet spot. If your home is weatherized to current standards, you should have no problem doing 100% of the heating and cooling with a heat pump without needing a backup system. So to get started, HeatSmart Alliance has a website, heatsmartalliance.org. We have quite a bit of information, including a number of links to other resources that we think are really useful. As I mentioned earlier, start with weatherization. Get your free energy audit. You can look at the Hudson Light website and get instructions on how to sign up for that if you haven't done it already. Get your home weatherized and air sealed to the extent, you know, insulated and air sealed to the extent practical. When it comes time to look at heat pumps, we suggest getting quotes from a couple of different sources. You'll find as installers do a walkthrough in your home that different installers will pick up on different things. And it's really, really helpful, even if you're very confident in the installer. It doesn't hurt to get a second opinion. And another thing is, this is not a commodity purchase. Price is important, but please consider also what's being offered and the reputation of the installer. Good equipment will not work well if it's installed or sized poorly. So you do want someone who's good to put the system in, and they may not be the cheapest bid. So that is my talk for today. I hope that was helpful, and I'd be happy to answer questions at this point.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, we can take questions live, or you can put them in the chat box. I just want to come back to that very last point you made about getting quotes from multiple installers. When we converted our house to all heat pumps, and it's a 20-year-old house, it was complex, had some air conditioning in part of it, so forth. I think we worked with, we got quotes from 3 different installers. They all approached the problems of our house differently in terms of what they thought the equipment should be, where it should be. It wasn't based on, oh, this one carries, this manufacturer and this one carries that manufacturer. It was really just design questions. Oh, you could have a heat pump here that would cover this much space or not, or whatever. Anyways, we learned a lot in the process. It was great. And the heat pumps have been terrific. Yeah, we still have our old oil furnace, but we hardly ever turn it on. It's been great. So, questions?
Hey, this is Susan Avery. I have a question. I have 4 mini splits in my house now, but I find that they were rated only down to maybe 20 degrees for heating, which means I'm still relying on I have oil. So am I always going to be relying on that oil when it's as cold as it was last night? And, it seems from what you're saying that it would be hard for me to completely get away from the oil.
Yeah. So may I ask how old your heat pumps are?
Oh, I put them, they're 5 or 6 years old.
Okay, so not too old yet. And to what extent have you air sealed and insulated your home? And roughly how old is your home? That's another key question.
My home is about 25 years old, and it's builder grade. I've done some sealing. The attic was not eligible. I'm not in Hudson Power and Light. I've had a mass save audit, and my attic is not eligible, or it wasn't eligible for rebates, and the guy didn't recommend insulating it more, nor did they recommend new windows. So
yeah, one of the challenges with Mass Save, and overall it's a great program, but I have heard that sometimes for the weatherization stuff, the contractors come in, they do the energy audits, and they only recommend the stuff that Mass Save will incentivize, and they may not tell you about other things you might want to do, but you would have to pay the full cost for. I don't know if that happened in your situation or not, but that's, you may want to revisit that and see if there's more you can do to weatherize your home. I have no idea. Yeah, obviously.
okay.
Operator, whether they just don't have.
It's just the documentation for them states that, and that's certainly been my experience, that I do use the heat, the oil when it gets cold.
Yeah, that's yeah, well, it is what it is, and at least you've got a heat pump, and you're offsetting quite a bit of your carbon footprint by using it. And but if when it comes time to replace those heat pumps, and eventually it will come time, certainly you'll be able to put something in that can heat to a much lower temperature.
So you're saying they're now more, I don't know if that's efficiency, but they
They now go to much colder temperatures, and frankly, even 4 or 5 years ago, they did as well. But I don't know exactly what happened, but it could be that the contractors you had in just didn't offer you those low temperature heat pumps for whatever reasons. I don't know.
my primary goal was air conditioning,
That's probably why, yeah.
which I didn't have, I didn't have any air conditioning before then, so.
So what we're trying to, I wish we could have had this talk 5 years ago. But
Yes.
what we're trying to do is encourage people who want to get air conditioning to really think ahead and say, hey, wait a minute, at the same time, for probably not a whole lot more money, it'll be a little more money for sure, but you can really take a dent out of your carbon footprint, get a nice, comfortable heating system in. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the question so that others can learn from what you've been through.
Yes.
But yeah, but you might find that there's more you can do on the weatherization, and at some point you'll have to decide if you want to replace your heat pumps early. It may not make sense to do that, frankly, but at some point you'll switch over.
Thank you.
Bob, I have a follow-up.
One second, hold on. Can everybody who isn't asking a question make sure they're on mute? There's a little background noise coming through from somewhere. Okay, I'm sorry. I think, Jim, was that you that was about to speak?
Yeah, I was going to ask the question, how low will a heat pump go in temperature now? We have one that seems to be effective down into the teens, which is a lot lower than I thought. It has a backup furnace, and that switches on. We happen to be in an all-electric home, so we've always had a zero carbon footprint, but we're new to heat pumps, and what it replaced was baseboard. But I was just wondering how low, and we've had some bad luck with ours, and upkeep and so forth can be kind of pricey, but we feel like we're doing something to save the earth, and sometimes I sort of, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, but overall we do feel pretty good about what we're contributing to climate change and so forth.
Yeah, well, I can say certainly in terms of the ductless, I'll start with the ductless mini split, multi-splits. There's heat pumps that are advertised to operate down to minus 13 Fahrenheit. Minus 13 Fahrenheit never gets that cold around here.
Oh, yeah.
So there's basically no lower limit on the best ductless systems available. For the central ducted, the data are a little bit fuzzier. I can say we have a central ducted heat pump that we installed in 2012 when we moved in, replacing and eliminating an oil-fired furnace. And that heat pump runs at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I can't tell you how much of the heat it's actually putting out, but it's at least operating and putting out some heat. And at 0 degrees, we do need to use our electric resistance backup. There's a lot you can do with sizing of the heat pump, and I didn't get into a lot of those details. There are some trade-offs. As you go bigger, not only does it cost more, but you can actually get into you can actually oversize the heat pump. So you have to be a little careful. But even with a central ducted heat pump, if your home is reasonably well insulated and air sealed, I would guess you could probably heat your home well down into the teens, and the heat pump would continue to assist with heating all the way down to about 0, something like that.
And Bob, we have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one, could we get a copy of this presentation, please? And I would tell everybody, this is going to be on Stow TV. And so you can give us about a week to get it, for Stow TV to get it up and on. It'll be on the YouTube channel, so you can get a copy of the presentation right there. Another question was, actually there's two questions that are sort of related in a way. One question was, does it make a difference where you site the heat pump, in the shade or the sun. And the other one was, would you recommend that the equipment that is installed have an awning or roof over it to protect snow building up? So 2 questions about siting.
Good questions. The most important thing about siting is that you put the outdoor units where they're not going to get damaged by snow or ice falling off your roof. Okay, so a good installer will pay attention to these things. Even though they're quite quiet, my recommendation is to keep them as far away from bedrooms as is practical. But if all other things equal, if you put the heat pump on the sunny side of the house, it will do a little bit better than on the, the shaded side of the house. It'll do better in the winter time. It'll obviously in the summer, it'd rather be in the shade, but don't worry about the summer, because the summer is only going to be 10 or 20% of your overall energy use of the heat pump. I mean, we're in, winter dominated territory here. So yeah, if everything else is equal, put it where the sun will hit it, but usually not everything else is equal. So there'll be other factors that drive where you put them. But the question about whether to cover them, boy, that's a sticky issue. Some cases it makes sense. For example, if you have to put an outdoor unit where it could be hit with snow or ice coming off the roof, then you probably do want to protect it with something. But other than that, I will say the ductless units have a little bit of an advantage because they're oriented that the airflow goes through horizontally, comes in the back and comes out the front. And whereas the typical central ducted systems have the air coming in through the sides and blowing out through the top. And in the 8 or 9 years we've had 9 years we've had our heat pump in place, we've had a couple of times, maybe twice, where the top of the unit has iced over, just the conditions were just right with snow or freezing rain. Once in a while snow is piled up, but that's because we have a wood stove, and sometimes I turn off the heat pump when we're running the wood stove. The heat pump can be off for days at a time. Some of the central ducted systems have a built-in snow shield on top, but most of them don't. An awning can be a good idea, but you don't want to make it aesthetically, bad. And you also have to make sure that any covering does not interfere with the airflow out of the top of the unit. And that usually means being at least 3 feet above the typical central ducted unit. So to shorten that answer a bit, unless you're protecting it from damage from ice or snow, I'm going to guess that most people aren't going to bother with covering it.
Okay, a different question. How do heat pumps in work, in operation, that have many heating zones, how does the heat get from one room to another?
Well, I assume the question is about the ductless systems. I'm not sure, but in the ductless systems, you actually put one of those indoor units in every room that you want to heat. And that's how it's done. And those are connected with refrigerant lines to one or more outdoor units. There are exceptions where you can use short ducts to kind of handle 2 adjacent rooms with 1 indoor unit. So that's a ductless system. In case of the central ducted heat pumps, you're using your ductwork in your home to distribute the heat around the house. And
Jeff Brown asks, and you're welcome to clarify my interpretation of your questions. He wrote, we have an oil-fired boiler, hot water integrated system. Do you know how much oil is spent on heat and how much on hot water production?
Yeah, it's a good question. the answer depends, of course, on your house and how many people are, how much hot water you use and that sort of thing. But if you wanted kind of a typical average number, one of the early charts I showed was a pie chart showing typical New England energy use in the home, and 60% or so was for home heating and 17% was for water heating. And I would guess your ratio is something like that. So a quarter to a third of that is for water heating.
And Alan Fierce wrote, he's got a question in stack waiting. Alan?
Yeah, it's actually maybe more of a comment, and I'm hesitant whether I should even point this out, because I would really like to see everybody go out and get their heat pumps right now, because we are dealing with a climate emergency. But I have this piece of knowledge, and I would feel remiss, I think, if I didn't pass it along to all of you. And it has to do with the state climate act that just passed earlier last year, about a year ago. I don't know if you all know about the Next Gen Roadmap Act, and it is a piece of climate legislation that has set some targets for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and its overall statewide emissions. And I'll just try to be quickly brief here. By 2030, now less than 10 years from now, we need to have our emissions statewide reduced to 50% of what they were in 1990. We're currently at about 25% reduction. So we got another full 25% more to go in just the next 9 years. The state is right now in a planning process for how they're going to reduce those emissions. And as Bob pointed out correctly, emissions from home heating are a very significant source of our emissions in Massachusetts. The plan for achieving those emissions reductions by 2030 is going to be released this July. July 1 is the deadline set by the act, requiring the administration, Governor Baker's administration, to do this. And there is no question that in order to achieve the emissions reductions the state needs from home heating, they are going to have to respond by offering financial incentives. Those could be in the form of tax credits. That could be low-cost financing, particularly, I think, for low-income homeowners and renters. There could be direct cash rebates. But they're going to have to incent people to move as fast as we need in the home heating area to achieve those reductions by 2030. So I'm giving you a mixed message here, because I'm saying, for those of you concerned about the climate, go do this right now. But for those of you who are hesitant for money reasons, we may know by the second half of this year whether there are going to be additional financial incentives provided by the state to install heat pumps and also to get weatherization. Maybe I'll just stop there.
Let me just comment on that, Alan. Thank you for all that. That is important background. We at the HeatSmart Alliance, some of my colleagues have been paying pretty close attention to that legislation, and they've also been paying attention to the Mass Save program. Again, in Stow, you're not part of that program, but most of the state is involved in the Mass Save program. And I think there's some good news here, at least for the rest of the state, because I don't know, within the next few weeks, hopefully the Mass Save program will be rolling out their new incentives, which I think will go into effect, as soon as they're announced. And from what we've been hearing, they're going to be substantial. They are upping the rebates for heat pumps substantially. They're making them apply to more situations than they have in the past. They're upping their loan program substantially. So a lot of good stuff coming with Mass Save. A little tougher with the municipally owned utilities because they're free to do their own thing or not do their own thing. And that's where, but certainly Hudson and Stow have a lot to say about that in theory. So, Concord's done a lot, for example, with their municipal light plant, and they tend to try to match the Mass Save rebates. And I can say with your electricity prices, you might not even have to do that. If you just up them a bit, you'd be selling heat pumps left and right. But big picture, yes, it's intimidating what we have to do. We have to install something like 1 million heat pumps in Massachusetts homes over the next 9 years.
Actually, Bob, it's $1,250,000 because of the way the legislature increased the goal from a 45% to a 50% reduction by 2030.
I stand corrected, but there's 2.7 million homes in Massachusetts, so that is a huge percentage, and it is a market increase. Isn't it a 50% market increase? This is at least a 500% market increase for heat pumps. I mean, it is huge if we're going to do it.
Right. I think Mike Duclos might have something to say about the Mass Save program. My understanding is that even with these additional incentives, it is only going to reach, I don't know, something like a quarter of the buildings that we need to electrify.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some disappointing news there in terms of how they're ramping up to get to this 1 million heat pumps. And well, all I can say is we've all got to work hard and talk to our representatives and say, hey, we need to make this go faster.
So we've got a couple of other questions, and our time is beginning to run out. And we may get back to Mike because he's got a note in the chat too. But there's a couple of regular questions from folks. First one, for a ductless system, what's the maximum distance you can have between the heat pump and the room device?
It's a good question. I think I can't give you an exact number. It's something an installer would have to answer, but I think the general answer is it's typically not an issue. There are some situations where you take a little bit of a performance penalty when you run longer refrigerant lines, and the installer has to account for that in the selection of the equipment. So it's important that the installer know how long the lines are. But, this equipment was designed to service homes, and, they figured out how to do it. So, yeah, some cases you take a little bit of a performance hit, but you can generally do it.
Okay, and here's the toughest question so far tonight. It's a political question. What are the pros and cons of the various brands of heat pumps, Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, or others?
Okay. Well, I'll say this, that way more important than getting a particular brand is getting a good installer who's going to size, select, and install the equipment properly. For the most part, the equipment out there is coming from multi-billion-dollar HVAC outfits. They've been selling this equipment for decades and decades in Asia and Europe. The equipment itself is good stuff. And I'm not going to hang my hat, on any one brand. We in the Alliance don't endorse any particular brand, but in the ductless mini split, multi-split market, Mitsubishi certainly has the lion's share of the market in New England, and they've been very aggressive about pursuing that market, and they've got a terrific product. But certainly Fujitsu, Daikin, LG, others out there are also very good, and I don't think you're going to go wrong with any one brand versus another. You really need to look at the specifics of what the installer offers. But I personally would put more emphasis on the installer than what brand they're putting out. when we talk about the central duct dead systems, the variable speed, low, cold climate heat pumps, you're typically talking Carrier or Trane or Bosch, or you might be talking about American Standard, which is a Trane brand, or you might be talking about Bryant, which is a Carrier brand. And I'm probably leaving somebody out, but those are the typical ones. Again, you want an inverter driven variable speed unit, and you want good heating performance. It's great if you can get heating seasonal performance factor of 10 or greater. I didn't use that jargon in the talk, but that's the rating metric that's used for heating performance.
Well, I want to let you off the hook shortly. This has been great, but there's a couple of other quick questions. I'm going to ask them in slightly different order because I think they flow in this order. First one is, how many weeks or months should people set aside to plan a heat pump upgrade from an old oil furnace?
Well, I'm laughing because unfortunately, like everything else with the pandemic and all other things that are going on in our economy, that time period seems to be getting longer. Yeah, I hate to scare anyone, but it can easily take 4 to 6 months, something like that. It can take longer. It depends how quickly you move and how quickly you make decisions, but frankly, it also depends a lot on the contractors, which you have no control over, how quickly they'll visit your home, how quickly they'll get you a quote, how quickly they'll answer your questions, and you'll have to pester.
I think they're asking the question, how long, once you have the equipment on site, how many days are you going to be out of business?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted that. Yeah, that's, I can only speak my own experience. It was a couple of days, but sometimes you can get it done in a single day. Depends on your system. But I would say I would guess the bulk of the systems are put in within 2 days. Somebody else may have better data than I.
That was certainly true in our house. How many weeks or months should people, I'm sorry, I'm rereading that question because it just moved. Does anyone know if there is a heat pump break-even calculator?
Well, there's been talk about one for a long time, and there's still talk about one. But in terms of one that's publicly available that I would personally recommend, I'm not aware of one right now, unfortunately.
Okay, well then that might lead, because there's somebody here with us, Mike Duclos, who might know the answer to that question, and he has a question. Mike, are you still with us?
Yes. So, Bob, I think you did an outstanding job here with the presentation. Very, very good, very informative, even gave me an idea. I would like to address Alan's question about incentives. We in Hudson Light and Power territory don't have access to mass save. However, we do have quite an interesting set of incentives. As Bob has already pointed out, we have a $750 incentive for heat pump hot water heaters, right? So mine got installed. I packaged up my documentation and my application. I sent it to Holly at Hudson Light and Power at 2:30 yesterday afternoon. At 3 o'clock, I got an answer back. You'll get your $750 credit on your January bill. So Hudson Light and Power is very responsive. They have a $500 heat pump incentive, which is not large, but it's not nothing. And if you should choose to go all the way to 100% electric heating, your electricity rate will change. And because they have a tiered system, I can't tell you exactly how much, but for me, it's the difference between about 13.4 cents a kilowatt hour and 11.3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's a couple cents a kilowatt hour, and that's a pretty big chunk of a very small number. And that applies to all of the electricity you buy, not just electricity that goes into the heat pump. So that's a good thing. And also, Hudson Light and Power has time of use charging for your electric car. If you promise to charge your car at night, well, that's when I'm going to charge it because it's parked in the garage and it's easy for me to do. I plug it in. Next morning, it's all charged up. they give me $10 a month, and $10 a month is $120 a year, and $120 a year is 4,000 miles of free driving. So it's not like Mass Save. They don't have an integrated weatherization program, but you can go around and find other contractors, for example, Dolphin Insulation in Littleton, and you can get weatherization done that way. And some of those contractors for people who are in Mass Save territories will also do the Mass Save program, except they may be a little bit better at finding the problems in your house and fixing them. So I'll stop there.
Thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you, Mike. That's great.
And maybe we should stop. You've got a lot of appreciation in the chat, Bob. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
No, sure.
So I have a hydronically heated house by oil, as Bob was mentioning earlier. And 2 years ago, I put in a 9,000 BTU, just one little ductless mini split, but it was the best cold climate mini split that Mitsubishi makes. And last year, I used 30 gallons of fuel oil, again, on the very cold nights, because it's a tiny machine that wasn't meant to heat the whole house, but most of the year it does. So 30 gallons of fuel oil and about 4,200 kilowatt hours of electricity for a net space heating savings of $600 or so a year. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks, Bob. Again, I would say, look, if you want to go over any of this, the video will be on Stow TV on the YouTube channel in about another week. And we'll put up the link so that you can find it. And thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next month with another program on how to green your house. And I don't mean with paint. Bob, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. You're all very welcome. And thank you all for tuning in tonight.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Tina. Good night.
Thank you guys. Good night.